Hello, I am Cecilia Heil, and this is
Berteke Waaldijk.
and we are students from the Gender Studies program. We are here today with Berteke Waaldijk, who is a professor in the Gender Studies program, besides many other things which we will find out about today during this interview. So to begin with, we would like to do a little round of quick-fire questions. We were both students of your gender and social inclusion class during the pandemic. It took place mostly online, and despite all that, you managed to always create a very fun atmosphere in the beginning of the class by asking us little warm-up questions like, are you drinking coffee or tea right now? And so in the spirit of that, we wanted to ask you some quick questions where we would appreciate a one-sentence or even shorter answer. Okay.
You
can.
So the first one that we wanted to ask you is right now, which do you prefer? Do you prefer reading for fun, like fiction, or are you more into reading non-fiction and research texts?
Non-fiction, if I have to choose.
Okay, next one. If you had to choose one of these two, which would it be? Are you more on the critique side, so critically analyzing structural issues, pointing out problems and what's wrong, or on the hope side, where the focus is on dreams and ideals and utopian scholarship and work?
Oh, that is so tough. I cannot imagine critique without hope of improving things. And hope is maybe too big for improving, but that's where I locate myself.
Yeah, makes sense. Last one. In terms of your career, are you more inclined to say that you prefer the social aspect of teaching, or perhaps the more like solitary, academically focused research aspect of it?
I definitely love the social aspect of teaching and working, being inspired by other generations than my own. I don't think academic scholarship is too lonely. It is also full of social encounters and challenges. But in the end, teaching has a bigger social dimension.
So, Berteke, your work was not just situated within the Gender Studies program, but you were also very busy with history. That's your academic origins, let's say. Could you tell us a bit, in your interdisciplinary work between and within Gender Studies and history, for instance, what surprised you the most?
You are right. I started as an historian. And as my MA advisor said in the laudatio when I graduated, Berteke, I have the feeling that you do not really feel at home in history. You can probably imagine that I was quite irritated and angry. I was just proud of my MA thesis, and then someone tells you.
What a tough thing to hear from a teacher in that moment.
Yes, that was tough. But it is a story that has a good ending. In the years afterwards, I developed into a gender studies scholar, and I realized that indeed within history I had not felt at home, and I did feel at home in situations where I had to work with colleagues who were from literature, from philosophy, from social science, and then bring in what I knew about history, but never on the basis of course, you're an historian. It goes without saying that we're interested in the past. No, not everybody is interested in the past.
Yeah.
And some of my literary scholars say, how can you be interested in this objective past while we have such beautiful text from that past? Let's analyze them with the literary tools. So I like that interdisciplinary, the way different disciplines interacted in gender studies, and that's why I kind of felt at home here since '87.
Berteke, how does interdisciplinarity feature in your research?
Well, I've written books or contributed to books that were co-authored from different disciplines, and that always is an exciting moment. So I remember giving a chapter to digital material, tracing new media in everyday life and technology by a huge number of colleagues from the Media and Culture department. We were not that old at that moment. The department was quite new. And there I did something on world exhibitions, and a feminist world exhibition that I had also written a book about, feministische openbaarheid, feminism public sphere. That was end 19th century. And in the book with the colleagues, I argued how we could, the analysis of a world fair could help to understand the rise of internet and the social meaning it had. So things like that, they wanted something on media. Gender studies and media studies were really close working together in the 80s and in the 90s when we in the 90s and the early years of the century. And that was, it felt like we shared, media studies and gender studies shared a kind of undisciplinarity. I mean, it's difficult to imagine that media studies was not seen as a discipline. Is it a subdivision of literary studies, or is it a subdivision of sociology? So scholars like gender studies were fighting to say we're not a subcategory doing women in history, but gender studies is really something different. And that is what I really liked. I also liked writing about teaching with colleagues who did not teach history but other things. So I once edited a volume, Teaching with Memories, where scholars from literature, from art, from history talk about how students' memories can play a role in teaching.
So coming from this discussion on interdisciplinarity and how you came to work with other scholars from other disciplines, we would like to know, how do you see the role of dialogue in these conversations, in this work, and especially within feminist methodologies in academia?
Yes, I think interdisciplinarity is impossible when you don't have a conversation or a dialogue and listen to each other. One of the big issues is, what do you include in the dialogue and what do you set as a requirement? Everybody has to believe or to follow this before we can have a conversation. Yeah. And what is most striking to me for in working with different disciplines are the different traditions of relating to societal relevance of your work. So there are some disciplines that say we can improve communication. There are also disciplines, my example is linguistics, who say we don't care if people speak terribly, we are just interested in the mistakes to understand how the brain works. So those are totally different relations to picking a topic, defining a topic, and talking about, to the outsiders, about the relevance. Well, within gender studies, feminism, anti-racism, awareness of class has always been very important. I mean, it was in part invented by people who thought about, one of my big examples is Bell Hooks, but she learned from Angela Davis. So many gender studies have an origin in the combining, talking about race and gender. So do we, then the big issue for me is, how do we require that everybody shares this opinion that race relations, gender relations are unequal? What is the role of this political conviction in having a dialogue? Can you say, if you don't share my idea about feminism, I don't want to be in a discipline with you?
Or a conversation.
Or a conversation,
Yeah.
or a dialogue. Yeah. So that remains a challenge. But what I liked when moving from history to gender studies was that it was no longer self-evident that my discipline had the right rules or the right topic or the self-evidence of this is important. So doubting all that is part of that dialogue. I would, for example, never in a class expect students to call themselves feminists. I would find it difficult if a student would say, I'm a racist. But then we are outside this, education and outside academic training, then we are in the field of politics and destroying what might be possible between human beings. But it's not a requirement to be a feminist or have a certain opinion about the world in order to learn and...
We're there at the start of the Media and Culture department here at Utrecht University. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
The fact that the university got reorganized all the time. First there were no departments, there were chairs who had their own group of people, and then it was reorganized into departments. And both media studies and gender studies were in a position of being marginalized in one of the existing old disciplinary departments. So being a subcategory in the history department or... and then it was decided, then we proposed, and I played a role there, let's make a new department, media and re/presentation. So this was still when representation was all en vogue in gender studies, and it was something that also worked with media studies. So that was established, and we were together in a new department, and gender studies and media studies, and that worked well. And later that was restructured when musicology joined us, and then media and culture seemed a better term a better title for that department. So the media and representation was at Kromme Nieuwegracht 29. It's now the Humanistics University, and then I think with the move to Muntstraat, it became media and culture, but I'm not 100% sure if the name and the move came at the same time. But it has been a good place for gender studies. I think the interdisciplinarity is really appreciated in the department, and I like that. It is easy to work, as I said, with colleagues who do media, film, music.
So Berteke, let's go a little maybe back in time, and could you maybe tell us a little bit about why you decided to become, or what inspired you to become an academic?
I was a student in history. I liked doing my MA thesis. My advisor, whom I quoted before, got a grant, and they needed someone to replace him, so I started teaching a few classes. That was the first year, no, the second, after a year of unemployment. At that moment, it was, I started thinking, I developed into a gender studies scholar, so I worked on that, and I started thinking about a PhD. I also, a few years later, my partner and I were expecting a child. My partner also worked in the same history department on one of those temporary jobs, and they said, "Oh, Berteke, you're pregnant. I guess you want to work fewer hours." He was invited and was invited, "Oh, you're becoming a father. We expect you want to work more hours." So the department thought they would level my hours to him.
Absurd.
You have to laugh.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You have to laugh, but don't underestimate how strong it still is.
Yeah.
If I hear about colleagues who have children or who have other forms of social responsibilities, and how difficult it is to talk about the class roosters, the time slots that you teach, it is still not in the interest of an organization to have people who also have other responsibilities. Well, the son was born, the parents, Peter and I, we decided that this was a ridiculous proposal, and we are still together, and now we are together grandparents.
Oh, exciting.
So it was not natural to continue an academic career. I then applied in Groningen, I worked in Groningen, then I applied Utrecht, and one of the things I soon did was apply for a grant to travel to the US, and I have to say that that was then a Fulbright. It was awarded me, grateful, happy. I had started in gender studies on those temporary jobs. in the US, this was already totally different. So there was no one who said, "Oh, you have a child, why are you here?" I mean, I came without a boy. The that as a woman you make a career, so that helped me. So when I returned, I felt this experience as supporting me. It also, at that time, as it still is, academia is very Western and phone dominated by images of top universities in the US, as if that is the best knowledge that can be produced. So it worked in my advantage that I had been to the States and had a prestigious fellowship there. The run of students who wanted to do gender studies made me aware that I can make a difference here, I can do something, so I liked that aspect. I enjoyed, then I did my PhD next to the teaching jobs. I liked the way the political scientists Siep Stuurman and Rosie Berteke, the philosopher, both gave comments on my historical PhD on women in social work. So yeah, that experience was good. Berteke was of course also not Dutch. I mean, in those years there was an overview that the only women who are full professors at Dutch universities are from abroad. Really depressing.
Shocking.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah, well, of course, the argument went that the women didn't want to give what it takes.
Oh. Oof. Yeah.
Academic authority could not be imagined in a female or non-male body. It was really difficult for people to, or really difficult. There was a culture that did not respect one gender. Yeah.
Even more impressive that you made it where you made it, and that we got to.
Yes, but by telling it, I'm also trying to share that it was changing and that I profited from the fact that it was changing.
Well, I think we're very grateful that it
very.
did, because it allowed us to have a group of teachers that were very international and mixed, and very definitely not a lot of male professors, and a very changing thing there too.
Yeah, that also made it, I worked with vast majority of female colleagues. So some of the harshest male chauvinism I did not encounter in my daily work.
Throughout your time as an educator, what is one thing that you'd say you've learned from your contact with either fellow colleagues or your students?
In 2004, I was appointed chair Language and Culture Studies. So that was not in the gender program, but it was a liberal arts program in the Faculty of Humanities. Still is, language, TCS. I had been teaching in that program, and typical of that program is that students do not start with a discipline, but find the field where they want to be educated. So liberal freedom of students, so I like that. What I have been systematically throughout the years always impressed with the new inventive combinations and topics that those students brought. So they enter and they explore, might I be a philosopher, do I want to go to gender, do I want to do communications, and they end up with fascinating combinations of courses that they take, they have to do, and that's one of my hobby horses. An internship, we say, choose, combine and look beyond. That is kiezen, verder kijken. And you either do study abroad for half a year or you take an internship. And the internship is the encounter of students' interest with what society might want. And every graduation I'm struck with how much it brings students and how cleverly they can talk about. I knew something about I know something about gaming and gender, and then working in an organization that offers games to make work practice more inclusive via games. Sometimes the combination is already out there, sometimes they bring something new to an organization that hadn't thought of it. So the creativity of students, I often say, without students, our university, it's not only the programs, it's also the research. The teachers learn from students topics, interests, societal issues that should be studied. Being in gender studies, and you were examples of it, the international students really enrich the program. So I had supervised a student who worked on sexuality education in primary and secondary schools. And then I'm totally happy when Barbara comes to me and says, I want to study that in Portugal. And then the research goes further. So that is something that inspires me.
Berteke, can you describe a moment in your career that you look back on fondly?
That I am proud and remember with much fondness that I lobbied to get bell hooks as a visiting Belle van Zuylen chair at Utrecht University. It was after I had gotten a grant in the US, so I was really a junior teacher still working on my PhD. There I encountered her work and I noticed how it inspired many more students than the regular students. So Bell Hooks is really an author who reaches in her writing to a bigger community and will never do the only academic thing. So when there was a chair, when we heard at the Gender Studies program that there was a chair for a visiting professor for half a year named after Belle van Zuylen. Belle van Zuylen also has a room named after her at the university. So I proposed bell hooks and convinced my colleagues who had not yet heard from her. So I felt I was for once in my life ahead of someone.
A trailblazer, one could say.
No, really. The real fun thing was that Bell Hook said, I want to speak with you in person before I accept. She was very... so how it happened then that my family was planning a holiday in the US because the first time I was there, I had worked all the time and I'd not seen anything. So we said, let's do a holiday with my 5-year-old son and my partner. So I said, okay, the holiday is taking place, but we will go by Oberlin. So Bell Hooks, I said, well, it happens to be that we're on holiday in that week. I can come to Oberlin, and I had tea with her. She asked me everything about, like you do, how did you become an academic and how do you think about... She was very kind. The boys were driving outside waiting for me to get out again. And then she said, I want to come. So, should I share this? I don't know. It's
amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, since then she has written 20, probably more books. She passed away, sadly, recently. And then I think, yes, someone who takes her own life and time so seriously and not thinking, oh, I'm going... They invite me to come to Holland, nice, let's do it, or I don't like it, but takes so much serious interest in what is behind it, what is the energy that people put into academic life, who also thinks that academic life is not in itself a value that it is connected to wider life. So she wanted me to talk about my parents, and I would never dare to ask a student to talk about their parents. I mean, I have a kind of privacy thing, also because I'm a teacher and she was in the position that she could, but it felt very full of integrity.
Thought maybe is there something that you think like you never had enough time to do now that you were busy and working all the time? Something where you're like, exactly. Something, oh, now I can finally dedicate some time to this, or a place to visit, a museum, I don't know, something just.
As light talk goes, you want to.
Exactly, anything that you think could be exciting. Yeah.
One of the things that Corona brought was the total increase in digital communication. And that was good because I could have coffee with my friends in Helsinki or in Coimbra or in Athens. One of the things that I would love to do is to travel by train slowly with a book to the places where the people I have Zoom, MS Teams, WebEx meetings with, and have real coffees in real places.